sang Songlam, and she's a local Buddhist teacher, so I'm going to ask her to, do you want to speak from there, or you can come up here, or whatever you're comfortable with.
Does this work? Yes? Yes.
Facing change with an inspired heart. And I'm going to ask that we hold our applause for our speakers until the end, so we have a bunch of people who are going to be talking to us, and we'll give them a huge round of applause at the end. Maybe a standing ovation.
So, hello everybody. Yes, I'm Kelsing Songlam, and I'm a Buddhist. So the thing that I have been asked to do is talk about inner transition. So this is all about transition. And my component is inner transition. And as Joanne said, I'm going to talk about facing change with an inspired heart, the importance of vision and the necessity of community. So when I was first asked to come here, I said, well, I'm happy to, but we are celebrating Buddha's enlightenment that day, so I will apologize. I've Geronimo'd in from the middle of a retreat, and I will have to leave immediately after I speak. So please forgive me. I would love to stay, because what we've just heard was so joyful and inspiring. So, yes, I've enjoyed learning about the transition movement, and I've been overjoyed by how much it lines up with what I understand in my heart about what's possible. So as Buddhists, we are all about change, and we learn that we can face change with an inspired heart joyfully. Changing joyfully is something that we say quite regularly. So transition, such an interesting word, because in reality, we're in transition all the time, aren't we? So the question becomes, do I want to transition with wisdom, we would say, or do I want to transition in the way that I have been or we have been? And so there comes a point when you make a decision. Something's got to change, you know? So I would say that the first thing that has to change is our heart. We have to make a decision. So in order to face change, we need to understand that change is necessary, that transition is necessary. And what has just been touched on briefly by Joanne, and in a text that I was given to read to understand the movement more, there can come a moment when you realize, uh-oh, there's a big fat problem, you know? And how we relate to that problem depends upon how much we understand that there's a solution. The extent to which we fully understand that there is a problem and that there's a solution will determine whether or not we can face change with an inspired heart. So we were just inspired. We're lucky, aren't we? There's some people who've done quite a bit of work ahead of us. They've already laid some groundwork. So that's nice. We have help. We have help. But I think what those people have, and maybe you got that sense when you heard them speaking, they have a vision. They have a vision of what's possible. And from that vision in their heart of what's possible, they then act. And their actions are so powerful because they're imbued with that need, that understanding that there's a need for change and that there's a solution. So this secretly lines up totally with what Buddha said. Hey, did you know there's a problem? But guess what? There's a solution. So one of the ways that we can respond to understanding that there's a problem is by becoming discouraged or thinking that how can I help? I'm just one person. So I don't take a straw at lunch. How does that help? You know, those little things, you know. I was quite struck by reading a verse once upon a time that said, continuous drops of water falling in a pot over time will make it full. First there's one drop, then two, then three, then four, until finally the pot is overflowing. And I was so struck by that because in our culture we have a saying, do you know it? Drop in the bucket. Do you know what we say? Drop in the bucket. Yes! Drop in my bucket. drops. Yes. Right?
Whoa.
That's the inspired heart. Today I'm going to put a drop in my bucket. My neighbor, I'm going to inspire my neighbor to put a drop in her bucket. My coworker, I'm going to inspire him to put a drop in his bucket. And drip, drip, drop, 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 ocean. You know, ocean of transition, ocean of change. And these words that we're hearing today are so beautiful. Resilience, you know. Yeah, sustainable. So here's the thing. If you think I am one person and I have to save the planet, that's going to be hard. Right? That's how it can feel, you know. We all know that feeling, like, how am I supposed to help this mess? The world seems so big, so enormous, so unmanageable. But the truth is, that intention in our heart, that understanding that change is necessary, and we have a vision of change, and then we act in accordance with that, you know. So we need a vision of what's possible. And so, as I've said, we're really lucky because so many others have already put so much work into the transition movement, you know. I think that's helpful. We're not starting from scratch, you know. So what we start to develop is a vision of what's possible, and they're giving us glimpses of what's possible, and we basically just get behind that. In Buddhism, we call that superior intention, which you think, I myself am going to do this. You think, I myself am going to do it, but at the same time you know that you have lots of help. You have lots of help. So we really need that vision. We need the understanding of that there's a problem, and we need to really know that in our heart so that our actions are in accordance with that understanding. There's a problem. We start acting on the basis of an understanding of the solution, and we're identifying with those drops. That's the vision that we need in our heart, and that's inspiration comes from that. But then we need others. Basic Buddhist view, we need others for everything. We rely upon others for everything. Everything we have comes from others. And one of the things that I've deeply appreciated about learning about the transition movement is that, as Joanne just said, it's not what they need to do and what they need to stop and what they need to change. It's us. We are changing. We are changing joyfully. It's just so energized and positive. So helpful to think. We use the analogy of if you're trying to sweep a large room and you have one bristle of straw, it can be done, but it's going to take a while. But if you bring many bristles together, you have what is called a broom. And then it's fairly effortless or light and joyful, perhaps, right? So that analogy of the broom, really helpful, you know, and to feel that energy. And then it's almost like we're all working off of each other's coattails, so to speak, you know. But that's how it becomes sustainable. Because again, if you felt like you were the person who wished to bring about change with your one little piece of straw, sweeping the whole of the earth, that would be hard to sustain, wouldn't it? I mean, it can be done, but that would be hard work. That would be a marathon run by yourself. You notice most people don't run marathons by themselves. There's usually people around you. So, sustainable means that we rely upon community. We rely upon community. And from that reliance upon community comes sustainability. And through that knowledge that others are with us and supporting us, we get that sense of resiliency, you know? But everything starts in the heart, absolutely. And, you know, we would say, Buddhists would say, that we create everything by mind. And my teacher actually, he says this, Geshe Kelsang says, I create everything first by mind. So in order for anything to come into existence, we have to first imagine it. You know, where did money come from? Someone thought, I know. I'll give you this rock and it has meaning. I don't know actually where money came from, but somebody thought, I know. I've got a great idea. Let's use a thing to represent that. And somebody invented money, you know. Where did this auditorium come from? Somebody's imagination. We're going to build a new college, and we need an auditorium, and we want it to look like this with raked seatings, and da-da-da. And then the architect took that vision that somebody had and drew a drawing. And from that drawing, then the construction people came in and built it. But if they had never imagined an auditorium at South Puget Sound Community College, we would not be sitting here right now. So we begin to imagine what's possible. We create everything by mind first. So the imagination is huge. It's actually, the mind is where you start. And within Buddhism, mind and heart, synonym. Same thing. We don't differentiate. Same word. So then we create, and we use the analogy that we are like a cell in the vast body of life. You know, so I'm preaching to the choir a little bit here, but you understand that sense that from the vision in our own heart, we start creating what we wish for. And we come together as a group, and there's such energy, such power, and it really is a movement, isn't it? And you just saw happy people up there, didn't you? Those were happy, engaged, resilient, joyful, transitioning, sustainable, inspired people. Something like that, yeah? So together we can move together, you know, of one mind in one direction, but all working together, like that. Yeah, good, okay, thank you.
So I'm going to ask us to break our first rule of the day. Hopefully we'll break lots more since Kelsang Sogland is leaving. She's going to go hang out with Buddha. Okay, so we're going to jump right into the rest of our panel. And in the interest of hearing more from them and less from me, I'm not going to do individual introductions. They will be up on the PowerPoint so you can get a little bit of background of our wonderful folks here. And we're going to be starting with Nadine Romero, who's our Thurston County hydrogeologist.
Thank you for having me. Okay, I set my stopwatch here. Okay, so basically, next slide please. I'm a hydrogeologist. I've been at it for 30 years, and I'm a physical and chemical hydrogeologist, so I work with water quality and quantifying our hydrologic cycle. Next slide. And basically, it's a lot of field work in the county. I've been there 5 years. I'm also adjunct faculty in the civil engineering department at St. Martin's University, and it's really neat. I found a niche teaching civil engineers physical geology, and hopefully getting them to be more creative and innovative with materials research, with energy design, and I also teach a little sub-course called the Geology of Poverty as well. So, you know, we have 2 billion people without drinking water or walk farther than 1 mile to get a drink of water, which is pretty profound. So there's going to be a lot of innovation and need for engineers and talent to help you know, make us resilient and get us out of a pretty severe future in terms of both climate and needs for materials and energy. Next slide. This is hard, difficult. I have to do yoga to look at this. Next slide, please. I work a lot with trying to understand climate models in addition to quantifying the hydrologic cycle. We collect over 1 million pieces of data in the county, just a team of 2 people. So we've got gauges on streams, in the groundwater system, and it's pretty profound how much information we collect. As a scientist, I process that information and try to figure out what's going on. What's our hydrologic cycle like? How does it pulse? How quickly does it pulse? What is its rates? And what's the impact of climate change on that? So understanding other regional models is extremely important in my work, and it is quite the odyssey and quite the view at this time about that hydrologic cycle. Next slide. Next slide. The hydrograph is critical. Next slide. So we do a lot of different quantifications, both in low flow conditions and high flow conditions. This last decade has been a challenge to us to quantify flows, to see what's happening, what does it mean when we now have a heavy rainfall pattern. Next slide. Ultimately, I try to keep my pulse on the large regional climate models, and then what does that mean in our local space? So my colleagues and I work very hard at the local space, trying to quantify that and relate it to this bigger regional understanding for the purposes of prediction and forecasting. Next slide. And teaching students is extremely rewarding and passionate a drive that I have. Not only teaching civil engineers, I taught here at the South Puget Sound Community College physical geology in the evenings as an adjunct. And so I bring in the world, hydrologic world I operate in the daytime, to infuse that with my students, to inspire them. We need a lot more innovation, and it's important how, as a working scientist, that I stay in the academic world as well to show them the problems we encounter and what kinds of things they're going to resolve. But we teach them resilience. Anybody can take a certified flow of a stream using an orange. It's a USGS standard. The orange finds the velocity of a stream. And so we're teaching them from really kind of primal skill levels to more advanced levels using Doppler, $10,000 Doppler meters to measure flows. So the idea is that once you give people these tactile exercises, they can understand the hydrology of their climate in their local world and tap into that and feel it on a very primal level. Next slide. Next slide. And so the goals of community, one of creating a resilient community is garnering and creating cold, clean, and more plentiful water supplies. And that's what Thurston County is about. My fellow educators there in the Water Resource Program, or in the City of Olympia, City of Lacey, and Tumwater, they have the Stream Team program. They've got many other educational programs for communities to tap into that, to help take hold of the hydrologic cycle and infuse cold, clean water, which is a critical issue. And they've been working hard at that. There are literally a year, hundreds of workshops to tap into, so many different types of resources. So as a scientist, it's kind of neat to stick my head out of the box, get out of the science a bit, and see what's observing around me. And the educational community of these cities and the county is pretty profound. So communities have a lot of resources to tap into. Next slide. And of course, children get involved, for example, building a rain garden or stormwater pond. Those are important for capturing the hydrologic cycle and reinserting it so that we have sustainable groundwater systems. And that is one of our biggest challenges in the next decade. Next slide. Next slide. Just kind of keep flipping to the end. Our educator teams, adults helping with the county stormwater pond, and these are the websites. I have more materials that I can give you out there to tap into, workshops and a variety of things that my colleagues have set up. Thank you.
Thanks, Nadine. Next, we're going to hear from Thera Black. She's come to us from Thurston Regional Planning Council, and she's going to be talking about transportation and land use.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's great to get to come and talk about this. I know that the topic that I'm going to talk about today is probably going to raise some eyebrows out there, because I'm going to talk today about how to satisfy some of our transportation land use needs, we actually need to embrace growth and think about growth as a finite resource to help us achieve our objectives, not something that is just a liability or a negative to push away. I have to tell you that I've been at Thurston Regional Planning Council, TRPC, for 20 years, and I will say that I had to kind of laugh at this notion I'm an expert, because I believe that I know less today than I knew when I started 20 years ago, and my world is not very black and white anymore, and so I think people find it frustrating to talk with people like me, because I like to talk about the nuances of the choices that we have in front of us. So this audience today probably doesn't need a lot of background about how this relationship between transportation and land use. I don't need to tell you about that bicycling and walking and transit is better than driving. What I do want to emphasize a bit though today is the relationship between transportation and land use, and how those objectives that we have are very much dependent. These objectives of less car dependency, more of a car-like lifestyle, are really dependent on the built environment. A sidewalk by itself does not make a neighborhood walkable. You need somewhere to walk to that's close enough to walk to if you're going to leave your car at home and reduce your auto dependency. Walking the dog is great, walking for exercise is great, but if what our goal is to reduce our energy dependency and our car dependency, we have to build our environment in a way that can actually accommodate that. Now, there's a buzzword out there right now, a jargony sort of a thing called complete streets, and everybody's all excited about complete streets. In the Thurston region here, we've been working towards complete streets long before that jargon became common in the planning arena. And as you look across the communities, all of their street standards are intended to accommodate all modes of travel. So this is something that we've been committed to in this region long before climate change became a topic of sort of mainstream conversation. It makes sense for a lot of reasons besides climate change for us to think about this intersection between transportation and land use and to build our communities appropriately. The challenge that I think we face right now, and I hear this a lot when I'm out in the communities, I hear people say to me over and over, I would take the bus if the bus came more often. It takes me 50 minutes to get from where I live to work if I take the bus, and it only takes 9 or 10 minutes to drive. Or I would walk to the store if the store were closer, but the store's too far away. And so what I kind of want to say back to folks is if you really want to reduce your car dependency, you need to be thinking about where you live and those lifestyle choices. All of us at different times, we all have different needs at different times in our lives. And right now what our community offers is a lot of good opportunities in suburban living and rural living. And these may be fighting words or whatever for some, but we really don't offer a lot of urban lifestyle choices here. And for those who want to really reduce their car dependency and actually maybe not have to drive very much at all, there are other communities that offer a lot more in the way of that for its population than Thurston County does. The Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater urban area is actually very suburban when it comes to transportation. We have a remarkable transit system, a transit system that belies our size and the way we've built our community. And I'm saying this not as a fault-finding thing, but I think it's important as we're standing here today trying to figure out where we're going from here and how to transition our community and provide people more options. We have to understand where we've come from. And so some of our, we think, I-5 is the problem, if only I-5 hadn't come in here. Well, before I-5 came in, if you lived in Seattle and wanted to go to Oregon or California, you came down Martin Way or Pacific Avenue. These were the old state highways, 4th and State, Capitol. Our main corridors, Harrison Avenue was the highway out to the West Coast before 101 came in. These were highway corridors, and with the exception of some parts, a few dozen blocks that were platted in the latter part of the 20th century, or late 1800s, early 1900s, with the exception of those blocks in downtown Olympia, none of the rest of this was pedestrian-oriented. What we're trying to do is create a pedestrian-oriented community where one did not exist. And to do that, we need growth. We need growth locating along these corridors. We need well-designed, well-executed growth that will be located on these corridors where there are other activities. We need districts, mixed-use districts that actually allow people who choose to live in those areas that option. And this is all about providing choice. It's number one, first and foremost. But what we seem to do often is we're very anti-growth. We're very opposed to growth. And then I have to challenge people and say, well, then where do we think people are going to have that opportunity to live where they don't have to rely on a car all the time? Right now, what we're hearing is that as people are retiring and they're wanting to downsize and not wanting to have to drive everywhere, they're moving to Tacoma, they're moving to Portland. We're hearing that young people are not as interested in coming back to this community as to some other communities because they have to have a car to get around so often. And this has really significant impacts for us. If you want a suburban lifestyle, we offer that in Thurston County. If you don't want a suburban lifestyle, people tend to look elsewhere. And I would challenge us to think today as we go forward, how do we tap into the growth that is likely to come to our region, and we can have discussions afterwards about what no growth might mean, but from where I'm coming from, I do see us as continuing to be an attractive place for people to live, to want to come here to work, go to school, stay and raise a family, retire, contribute to their community. How do we welcome and bring those people into our community? And that's going to be with more development, and where that development occurs is what's really key here. And so we need to figure out the economics of growth, figure out how, beyond the sound bites, beyond the, make growth pay for growth sound bites, and let's talk about what the economics of growth are. How do we create places on these corridors where we have good transportation options to attract that type of investment? There's not that much investment for the kind of high-quality, mixed-use community development that we seem to say that we want, the things that we like when we go to the Pearl District in Portland. That type of investment, there's not a lot of opportunity for it. There's not a lot of capital for it. There aren't a lot of people who do it really well. And there are a lot of communities vying for it. So if we want it here, we have to figure out how to make it happen. We cannot regulate that into being. You cannot force somebody to build something that doesn't pencil out. We can continue to regulate things, and we can continue to oppose things and kill projects, but then that is sort of saying in that weird nuanced way that my world works, then we like the sort of auto-dependent lifestyle that the very vast majority of people live in Thurston County, and we don't believe that it's important to provide an alternative. I personally, in my heart of hearts, I don't believe that that's where our community is coming from, that we want to say people don't have a choice to live an urban lifestyle, but achieving that is more than just paying lip service to building bike lanes and sidewalks. We've, right now, 30 to 60% of all of our road projects go into non-motorized facilities. And Nadine just talked about the hydrological cycle. All of those bike lanes and sidewalks create stormwater and runoff. That is fine as long as we have people using those facilities. It's a waste if we build those facilities and the land use doesn't actually generate the trips. So I'm sort of challenging us to think beyond development as being something negative. It's good for, it's good not just for transportation, land use, and choices. It's good for energy, it's good for environment, it reduces cost on infrastructure, preserves our social capital. So I just want to challenge us today to think about growth and development differently than we have in the past. Thanks.
Thanks, Thera. So next, I was asked to remind or to put out the intention that this today is a zero waste event, or maybe as close to zero as we can possibly get considering the circumstances and resources. So that's a segue to our next speaker, Terri Thomas from Thurston County Solid Waste, and she's going to be talking to us about materials management and product stewardship.
Thank you. I work in solid waste that is not poop. I'm just going to put that out now. It is trash. I'm surprised how many people do get confused on that. And I came this morning with guilt because last week was really difficult and I was going to work on my presentation yesterday, but the sun was out, and instead I expanded my garden to make more room for food bank food. And I felt really bad about that all night as I'm trying to whip it together. And after our first speaker, I thought, you know what, I just put my drop in a different bucket. I'm okay, so I do not apologize. Okay, when people talk about greenhouse gas reduction, they normally think of solid waste as an afterthought if they think about it at all. It's not considered a big player like transportation or energy. But materials management is not just about the trash or just about the recycling. The story of stuff is how we deal with our resources all the way through the economy, from extraction or harvesting, production, transportation of goods, reuse of materials, and unfortunately disposal. You're ahead of me. According to the EPA, materials management is associated with 42% of our total U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. I'm not going to address the 13% of food because experts are going to talk about that. But 29% of that is provision of goods. It's the highest percentage on that chart. So everything you buy or you use or you toss, or the buildings you go in or the vehicles you get in or on, contributes to this. So we may really want to think about materials management. Additionally, unlike many greenhouse gas reduction strategies, materials management can be heavily influenced by state and local governments. You have the power at the local level in this room to actually make some changes. So we need to revise the approach that we're using to make sure that it serves long-term human needs by using and reusing the resources that we have productively and sustainably all the way through their life cycle, so that we minimize the amount of materials we use and the environmental impacts that they create. Next slide. So let's take a look at our waste stream. Product waste has skyrocketed, as you can see. Behind that is everything I mentioned, the raw resources, the production, the transportation. And not enough of the products and packaging that we use are recyclable or being voluntarily recycled. So it's the Solid Waste Management Department's job to deal with the trash produced all through Thurston County. It goes to the transfer station in Lacey up at Hawks Prairie. We compact it, we put it on a truck, we take it for a drive to Centralia, we put it on a train and we drive it, or it goes 250 miles away down to Clickitat County. So it's a very nice day trip. We, out at Hawks Prairie, we charge a tip fee, and what that is the price per ton of solid waste. And that covers all of our direct and indirect costs, staff, equipment, facilities, power, transportation, the whole thing. And then we pay the tip fee down at Clickitat County. So whether it's a ton or a million tons of waste, we still need to manage and maintain that infrastructure. And those charges also have to fund the waste reduction programs, which I'm so proud of. So that, that does cost money. Since I started in 2006, the per capita recycling has increased 51%. So you all deserve it. And I think that's a direct result of excellent staff and a very, very receptive community and a strategy to provide more programs and technical assistance rather than just education and outreach. And as mentioned, that does cost money. We've also seen a decrease in solid waste of 19% per capita. Some of that is the waste reduction programs. A lot of it is to do with the economy. You don't buy stuff, there's no packaging, and you don't have stuff to throw away. So now here's the catch-22. The more successful you are at reducing waste, the less money we have for managing the waste and for the waste reduction programs. So then tip fees go up. I don't know if you noticed a few years ago, they went up a lot. And sorry, that's my fault. And there was a strategy behind that. And I could go on about that, but I won't. But the question is, how high can we go? So do we need a new system to fund solid waste? Probably, just like we do for road infrastructure. The more energy efficient we are, the less we drive. We can't pay for the roads. So despite the fact that it's financially irresponsible, we're still working on more waste reduction programs. As an example, in Thurston County, we use 90 million plastic shopping bags a year.
How much?
Just 90 million in Thurston County. Now, I've just started the conversations with the cities to work on that. And the topic of bans comes up, and it's very politically charged. So the question is, will we have support from the public, the businesses, the cities, and the county commissioners to actually make a change that will have impact? Okay, I vote for all of you. Then there's businesses. They produce a large percent of our waste stream. Not so good recyclers. So do we make commercial recycling mandatory, even if it costs more than trash alone? Or how about construction and demolition debris? 23% of our waste stream before the crash. Do we maybe put together a deposit system that when the builders go in for their permits, they put down a deposit, and if they come back with proof that they reduced their waste, recycled it, they get the deposit back? All of these take public support. Can't do this in a vacuum. Okay, stay there. So there's one promising area. If you look at the above slide, we currently operate under two systems. Producers and retailers make stuff, sell stuff, consumers buy stuff, throw stuff away, and then they all ride off into the sunset. And the bottom slide kicks in. Again, local government's responsible for the waste stream. These two systems don't communicate. So they manufacture stuff that's toxic or non-recyclable, and they walk away. We don't have any input as far as what they produce so that we can better management. So I'm going to show you the same chart with just one small change. Look at the red box. Okay. Now the magic happens. So that is extended producer responsibility, and that is a mandatory product stewardship policy. There's two features of an EPR policy. Is one, it shifts the financial and management responsibility to the producer. It goes upstream. The other factor is it provides incentives to the producers to incorporate environmental considerations into the design of their products and packaging.
Does that happen in Germany?
So this maximizes all the health and safety and environmental concerns. EPR has been common in Europe forever. Canada has some excellent models. Next slide. And it's starting to catch hold in the US. In 2006, we had 23 laws. In 2011, there were 73. However, those were really hard-fought battles. Manufacturers don't want to pay that added cost. And right now, we don't necessarily want to burden manufacturers. And elected officials don't want to burden manufacturers. In the last regular legislative session in Washington, we had 4 producer responsibility bills up to bat: carpet, paint, batteries, and pharmaceuticals. How many did we pass? And also in the US this year, we only added 2, so I'm a little concerned we're losing the momentum. I worked on the pharmaceutical legislation last year, and the year before, and the year before. Despite the fact that we had 250 supporters, big organizations, public health, law enforcement, everything else, there was 22 drug lobbyists in Olympia. There was 2 of us from local government. We really need the help. So big picture right now, I think EPR, extended producer responsibility, is the best chance we've got, but it needs to be bigger and move faster. And again, I think the public involvement is what that's going to take. So again, provisions of goods, 29% of the greenhouse gas emissions, so it's really something that we need to think about. I know there's solutions out there, and I welcome you to come to this session and let's get those figured out.
Thanks, Terri. Before we move on to our next panelist, we're about halfway through, and so I'm going to suggest that the next panelist is going to talk to us about energy. So let's generate some of our own. You can do some seated yoga and stretch. You can stand up and twirl around. Whatever works for you. Maybe catch the eye of somebody across the room, a little wave.
Are you going to stay there?
It's always a little dangerous to turn a crowd loose in the middle of a presentation. Okay, next up we have Kirk Haffner with South Sound Solar, a local business that's been working in the area of solar energy for many years now. So, Kirk.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to see familiar faces, customers, advocates, activists. I need to get up and move around, obviously. I had a desk job for years, and that's why now I do solar. I'm happier on a roof where I get to see the sights, regardless of the weather. If we could do the first slide, please. What? Okay. We'll wing it. Yeah, they were sent out to Luke and that's all right. Well, a couple of things that I was going to do. So I start off with a cartoon, and it's one that's been done many times, where a character is talking to, you know, some big corporate person and saying, "Can you help us with our energy crisis?" And they said, "Well, if you want oil, we own the oil in the ground. If you want coal, we own the coal in the ground. If you want nuclear plants, we own the uranium mines. If you want wind and solar, well, they're not feasible." Right? Luckily, nobody has been able to say that they own the sun and the wind like they own the mineral rights, right, or the water rights. And what people don't realize, if you look at our portfolio with PSE, the majority of that portfolio is still coal and natural gas, over 50%. And then we still have a small percentage of nuclear. We've got a good hydro mix in that portfolio, approximately 1/3. And then there's this little space down there that says 1% other. Okay? Now what's interesting in that 1% other is it lists things that that I don't generally think of as renewable. It lists biofuels, for example, or biomass generation, and it does not list wind. Well, that got me thinking, why not? Okay? How many people do the Green Power program with PSE? Yeah, wouldn't you like to see that your investment is showing that the wind in their state portfolio? Well, it's an interesting thing, and I encourage you all to talk to PSE about it. What happens is, they are sponsoring windmills. I guess PSE has been rated or noted as one of the top wind producers in the nation as a utility. We have 3 wind farms that are up and working in central and eastern Washington. But what happens is they sell their green tag credits to other companies or to other utilities, so they can't report them as part of our state portfolio. So it's kind of interesting. But that's how green tags work. So if there's a big coal plant, for example, that needs to lower their environmental footprint, they can buy the green tags from the wind power that we're sponsoring. Yeah. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about is what's the challenge for energy? And I really don't think there's a challenge. I think we have a great opportunity. We have the infrastructure in place in Thurston County right now to move forward in making great gains, great strides in energy. If you look at the common sectors in our society, right, where there is residential and commercial and industrial, typically the things that you and I have control over is over 50% of our energy need. That's residential, houses, and transportation. And as consumers, we can make choices. And the 2 choices we primarily can make right now, the infrastructure in place, number 1 is to reduce our energy consumption. And Thurston Energy is here today. Please talk to them out there. They have a great program where they do energy audits on homes, and they can help lower your cost on your utility bill and make your home more comfortable. They can advise on energy efficient upgrades, okay? And so that's the first one, reduce. Well, we just had appliance breakdown, and I hunted. I got the highest efficiency appliances that I could to replace them. Insulation, windows, new appliances, new efficient heating systems reduce our energy usage, right? And the second one, of course, is to produce. We can make energy. And that, what I was referring to earlier, solar, more sun strikes the earth in an hour than the entire world uses in a year. There's no other energy source that's even comparable in terms of the resource as the sun. Now, a lot of people will ask about wind, and wind is a good resource, unfortunately not in Western Washington. Just know that. Solar will outshine wind. Hey, slides. Cool. I'm going to start all over. Reset the clock. No. Solar outshines wind as much as little as 4, as much as 10 times. So in terms of dollars per watt invested in either a windmill or solar system, you're going to get the 10 times the energy out of solar. Pardon me? In Western Washington, yes. In Central and Eastern Washington, we do have a better resource. They also have a better solar resource, but that's another thing. So let's go back up one, please. Thank you. And what was the one before? Was the cartoon? Real quick. So I already mentioned that. Okay, let's move forward. Thank you. One up. This is what I already talked about. So of those things, as I said, we can reduce, we can produce, invest in renewable energy. And if you don't have the resource on your house, there's other programs available right now. We're starting the Solarized Thurston campaign. Thurston Energy is. We've got community solar. We were looking at putting solar on schools, on churches, on public buildings. And, or you can buy green power with Puget Sound Energy. Just ask them to give us the credit, not somebody else. Next slide. And this is what I was referring to, their portfolio. As you can see, we still have a ways to go. But as we get more, as we lower our consumption and we get more renewables online, you know, I'm really looking forward to seeing that profile change. So we have a category up there that says renewables, and it starts taking up more and more and more of the pie. Next slide, please. And just this is a slide that was done by the Rocky Mountain Institute, and to me, I think it's very positive. Real quick, Rocky Mountain Institute is a big scientific think tank out of Colorado. Avery Levins is one of the lead scientists. They have looked at it, they have studied it. They say we can be completely fossil fuel independent by 2050. And one of it has to do with these things. Up in the upper left, we can have the industrial-sized windmills located at the good areas around the country. Up top, we've got a smart grid, and that's industry. With businesses, we can have large commercial collector arrays that we have already for both solar thermal, and different types. We can have distributed generation. We have one right down here at Lot, where you're using methane, the byproduct methane gas to produce electricity. And then on our individual homes, get solar on the house, produce your own electricity, plug in your electric car, and as consumers, we can take our 50% of that energy requirement and really lower it down. Next slide, please. Thank you. So why solar? Just real quick, just a reminder, compared to wind, solar is relatively pollution-free. When you make a solar panel, it makes all the electricity that it took to make that panel in 3 years. Then you have 30, 40 years of literally free electricity coming from that panel. The panels have a long lifespan. The 30-year warranty is real common now, okay? And panels that were originally made in the 50s and 60s are still producing electricity. There's no moving parts, they don't wear out. We've got panels that are made in the US and made in Washington. The picture on the bottom is of an install we did in the city, first commercial install in the city of Tumwater on a flat building with the Washington Silicon Energy panels. And I think the challenge we have is people are making these choices, okay, about first, reduce your energy consumption. Second, can you produce your one? We're actually coming on a little bit of a time limit right now. Some of the incentives that are in Washington State begin to expire. And the first one is the sales tax. Right now, solar is exempt from sales tax, which is nice, especially when the systems are large. Yes. And, but that goes away in June of 2013. Okay, so I really encourage you to work with a good organization like Thurston Energy. You know, are working with PSC as a business. They're a great partner with the business, and you as a consumer work with both. Find out about the Solarized Thurston campaign. Find out what you can do to lower your consumption in your house, your business, your transportation, and consider going solar. Thank you.
Thanks, Kirk. So next up, we've got John MacLean with Energy Efficiency Finance Corporation talking to us about local economy.
Good morning. It's a privilege to be with you. I want to begin with a thesis on economics. That economics is about meaning and ultimately our happiness. We're deeply connected with one another. Our happiness does stem from our common well-being, and so it's based on fairness, justice, equity, and long-term sustainability, meaning planning and acting for the 7th generation. In sum, economics is about our values. Next slide. Economics began as a branch of moral philosophy. Adam Smith, author of The Wealth of Nations, held the chair of moral philosophy at the University of Edinburgh. He and other early writers on political economy took great pains to ground their thinking with clearly stated views of human nature, that we are sympathetic and connected. Only since the late 19th century has our economics radically limited its focus to markets and money-based exchange and the workings of the price system, and lost this moral dimension. Our dominant economics today is based